This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by Dole Food Company, the world's leading producer and distributor of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of Straight Talk Radio. I want to welcome veterans and active military personnel who are tuning in from remote locations over the Internet, and also wish a very special listener, Mark DeLawrence, a happy birthday on this 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. In just a moment, civil rights leader and former candidate for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, Mr. Jesse Jackson, will be joining us to talk about the benefits and the conditions needed to live in a true meritocracy. He'll also weigh in on the upcoming presidential election. But before Mr. Jackson joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Jesse Lewis Burns was born in Greenville, South Carolina. Jackson was accepted to the University of Illinois on a football scholarship and later transferred to North Carolina A&T, where he graduated with a degree in sociology. He then attended the Chicago Theological Seminary, which he later left to join Martin Luther King at the forefront of the civil rights movement. During this period, Jackson is known for directing Operation Breadbasket, a successful job placement agency for Black Americans. Sadly, he was working with Mr. King in Memphis on the day Dr. King was assassinated. I also want to add that Mr. Jackson completed his master's degree from the Chicago Theological Seminary 3 decades after leaving the institution. Ongoing education has been a consistent theme throughout his life. In 1971, Jackson founded the organization People United to Serve Humanity, better known as PUSH, which later merged with another organization he's also credited with, the Rainbow Coalition. It didn't take long before Jackson's talent for peaceful negotiation found its political footing. He was dispatched to Syria, where he secured the release of American pilot Navy Lieutenant Robert Goodman without incident, and then to Cuba to extract 22 Americans who were being held by Castro. In 1991, on the eve of the Persian Gulf War, Jackson met with Saddam Hussein and successfully brokered the release of Hussein's human shield, which consisted of many British and American nationals. And in 1999, he also secured the release of 3 U.S. prisoners of war in Kosovo. And given this track record, it's no surprise that Jackson sought the Democratic nomination for the presidency 2 times. And while he did not prevail, there's no question as to whether Jackson played a big role in forging the party's agenda. I'll also add that Mr. Jackson has authored several books and hosted CNN's Both Sides with Jesse Jackson. It's my pleasure to welcome to the program acclaimed civil rights advocate, Mr. Jesse Jackson. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. Jackson.
Good to be with you on this glorious, historic day.
It is a glorious day, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. If it's all right with you, I'd like to open our conversation today by citing a few facts and then asking you to comment on them. Unemployment for Black Americans is around 14% and has consistently remained double the unemployment of white Americans. The number of Black citizens living in poverty is up from 25% in the previous administration to 27%. And between 2010 and 13, the median household income for Black families plunged 9%. And finally, only 1.7% of all small business loans in 2013 went to Black-owned businesses. So my question for you, Mr. Jackson, is this. What conclusion should we draw from these statistics?
Well, there are targeted patterns of race discrimination without protection from the law. For example, of the 9 million homes that were foreclosed, about 3 million were Black and brown. They found in court that the banks had targeted, steered, and clustered Black and brown homes, and they were fined for it. And then they would bail out. But they were bail out not linked to lending up the reinvestments. The banks are washing capital, but the people who lost their homes, often that was their only business, they plunged into poverty, and that's a pattern of discrimination. When you lose those jobs, you lose your tax base, you can't fund education. The second is that the automotive companies were found to have been overcharging Blacks and browns, and they were fined just last week $25 to $50 million. And this was the pattern. You also have cases like Silicon Valley where companies are not honoring EEOC and contract compliance laws. In some sense, blacks are not protected by law from patterns of racial discrimination.
Well, we have laws to protect people of color. Is this just a case where we're not enforcing those laws, or are they the wrong laws? I'm trying to get my arm around this.
Well, the laws are not being enforced. Most of the Silicon Valley companies, for example, these companies have government contracts. They have government standards. Of the top 25 companies, we found 189 board members, 36 white women, 3 blacks, and 1 Latino. In the C-suites, around 370, 3 blacks, 3 Latinos. Jobs around 2% across the board, and less than 1% investment in development. And these on the STEM tech side. On the non-tech side, lawyers, ad agencies, and the like, virtually none. So these patterns of exclusion should have been checked long time ago by either the Civil Rights Commission and the Equal Opportunity Commission.
Now, you're a strong advocate for a meritocracy in America where people rise according to their merit, but there's a lot of things that go into merit, things like a great education. So what do you say to people who point to a black high school dropout rate that's twice of white students? I mean, it's hard to have a meritocracy if the scales are tipped before you even get into the workplace.
Well, that's true. Effort and excellence means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. You look at Baltimore, for example, right now, a lot of focus because of the violence on police. Well, 80% of the police do not live in Baltimore. They live between Virginia and New York. The same is true with the firemen. So they come in not as neighbors but as occupiers. Secondly, 18,000 vacant homes are abandoned lots. Well, when you lose that many homes because of foreclosures, you lose drugstores and you lose grocery stores and you lose medical clinics. When that happens, then they stop the investment in targeted jobs and skilled trade training. The investment is down on the riverbank where the TIF money goes and the pension money goes and the government contracts go. So just a pattern of those invested in develop, those who are not invested in do not develop. It's not natural. It's normal, but it's not natural.
Well, now we know, and you are a graduate of sociology, we know that there are thousands of studies that have been done that show that if there is no migration path, no hope, no plan for assimilation, that these neighborhoods become hubs for violence and upheaval.
Of course, that's true. When you have a situation like Chicago, for example, I now live where you have drugs and there's no gun shops in the city of Chicago. You have guns in, drugs in, jobs out. So you have unemployment around 30%. You close 50 drugstores, 50 public schools, closed drugstores, and 75 grocery stores. There's no units for emergency care. There's abandoned zones. There is no plan for urban reconstruction. You know, you look at these same kids who come out of those neighborhoods on the athletic field, they perform very well. Why do they perform so well on the athletic field, black and white together? Because whenever the playing field is even, 10 yards for all first downs, and the rules are public, the goals are clear, the referee is fair, and the scores are transparent, we do very well. When the playing field is not even, rules not public, goals not clear, we don't do so well.
That's exactly right. In fact, I had Tavis Smiley on the program last week, and he said that and I love this quote, by the way, because it was so visual. He said, there's a freeway, a highway into poverty, and a sidewalk to get out. And I think that pretty much sums up the frustration in the situation. Now, we're going to take our first break, but stay right where you are. When we come back, we're going to find out whether electing the first black president and taking down the Confederate flag in South Carolina really pacifies real progress, or is it progress? You're listening to the Costa Report. I'm here today with Scott Caraccioli. Where can people go to get Caraccioli Cellars wines?
The best place is your computer and go to caracciolicellars.com, and that's CARACCIOLI, Cellars with a C. Or if you happen to be in the Carmel area, visit our tasting room in downtown on Dolores. We're also available in many restaurants. We're distributed in about 15 states, and we direct ship to about 30. So there's a good chance that we can get it to your door.
And I will tell you that the easiest way to get the wine is to go straight to the website. It makes it so convenient to have it arrive at your doorstep. I cannot tell you how many dinner parties I've had where, even though you're not that far away from me, I've ordered by mail so that the wine would arrive in time for my dinner party, and it always has.
Visit the Caraccioli Tasting Room on Dolores Street in Carmel by the Sea, or find us online at caracciolicellars.com, or reach us by phone 831-622-7722.
Hi, I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. Dole has a bounty of berries ripe for the picking. Fresh berries are not only delicious, but some of the most powerful disease-fighting foods available. Researchers have found that berries have some of the highest antioxidant levels of any fresh fruits. So add a handful or two of your favorite berries to your next meal and enjoy their nutritional benefits and natural sweetness in all of your dishes, from salads to desserts and everything in between. For fresh tips and ideas from Dole's berry experts, visit berries.dole.com. And be sure to check out the pages of mouth-watering recipes. Whether it's a sweet and savory blueberry cranberry chicken salad or a simple strawberry sorbet, Dole has the perfect berry to inspire your next berrylicious dish.
Ben Lomond Market. Want low prices, great savings, and excellent customer service? Look no further than Ben Lomond Market.
Andy Gustafson. My job is the produce manager at Ben Lomond Market. I do all the ordering, quality control, bringing in new items, making sure everything is nice out on the rack for the customer to buy. I have worked here 25 years. I personally love the customers we have. I love working for the owners I have, and comparing those two together, it's a real easy, nice, fun job. My favorite is apples. Any kind of apple. I love eating apples. My favorite vegetable is probably Italian squash. We have plenty of fresh product, both in produce, meat, deli. We have, I think, a very warm crew, and we really try to make the customer happy. We really appreciate our customers.
Visit benlomondmarket.com, a proud member of Think Local First, Santa Cruz County.
Hi, I'm Kay Swirling from KSCO in Santa Cruz. I'm 94 years old, and I want to draw your attention to a very important website, criticalhealthnews.com, that I strongly urge all listeners to visit. This website contains valuable health information that the pharmaceutical industry does not want you to know. Most of the prescription drugs you hear about on TV these days have side effects that are worse than the disease or condition itself. You know, like death. To me, it makes much more sense to give my body all of the 90 essential nutrients it needs to live long and stay healthy. There are some amazing articles, videos, and audio lectures by Dr. Joel Wallach and pharmacist Ben Fuchs that I believe everybody should hear. Go to criticalhealthnews.com.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is civil rights activist and former presidential candidate, Mr. Jesse Jackson. One of the facts that is hard to ignore is that almost every metric has slid backwards for the black community under the first black president's administration, causing many people to wonder whether this was more symbolic than anything else. Were we unrealistic about what the first black president could do to level the playing field?
Well, let's look at what has happened and what needs to be done. For example, when he came into office, we lost 800,000 jobs that month. There has not been a net loss of jobs a month since he has been president. There has not been the targeted jobs that needs to be targeted because rising tides don't lift all boats, particularly those who are stuck at the bottom with semen in them. Second, that there are those who have health care now who did not have it before. I'm in South Carolina today.
Yes.
There are 1 million people in poverty, a fourth of the state. So 250,000 have no health insurance, for example, and about half white and half black. And this state rejects $12 billion in affordable health care. Now, a state with a $7 billion budget rejects $12 billion, the 9-to-1 ratio. Then they'll accept federal money for highways and airports and seaports, but not for health care. If they had that $12 billion, you could build in the rural areas health clinics, which is construction, about 45,000 jobs involved. That would lift people, black and white, out of poverty. And so that becomes a fact. He also put forth a proposition to do fast rail, and it was rejected by Walker in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, rejected in Florida. Fast rail that Americans make the steel, lay the rail, build the cars, connect small town, large town. But many of the suburbs do not want fast rail because they think people in the city will come there and will work there and begin to live there. So there are some mitigating circumstances. There is some unfinished business on the racial justice agenda and gender inequality agenda. But I think, given the odds, he's done quite well.
But isn't there a sense that, I don't know, maybe it's just me and maybe it's my age. I just turned 60 this year. And I've been living with racial inequality all my life. And I'm very saddened by the lack of progress. And I guess that in my heart, seeing a black president be elected felt like it felt like such an opportunity, like not just a door opening, a barn door opening.
It seems to me that if there were Lyndon Johnson was able to do targeted poverty, and he opened it up in Appalachia. He was smart enough to whiten the face of poverty and de-racialize debate, and that war on poverty helped everybody, black and white alike. So far, nothing as targeted as urban reconstruction has come down, and that really is unfinished business. What happens when the urban policy in some sense reflects our trade policy? Jobs out, going to cheap labor markets, and poverty coming in. Mm-hmm. The Silicon Valley companies are more interested in hiring and recruiting H-1B workers from India than they are training youth here at home to do those same jobs. So there's a connection between unemployment at home and our trade policy, for example. But it's fair to say that there are more people with health insurance than had it before, even though some want affordable care, but they don't want Obamacare.
Yes.
That's like folks that want the omelet but don't want the egg. Just mean and frustrated in that way. How can a state like South Carolina refuse $12 billion affordable care, which will expand the medical services and expand employment rationally? How can Georgia reject $14 billion or Texas $100 billion that would lift so many people out of poverty and expand their life options?
Well, let's talk about symbolism for a moment, like the taking down of the Confederate flag. I mean, that to me seemed more like a symbolic gesture than anything that's going to improve opportunities and raise the standard of living for Americans of color. I mean, do you think that too much of our attention is diverted on gestures like this instead of rolling up our shirt sleeves and really attacking the problem?
Well, I think symbolism is important. If the Jewish community saw the swastika flag hanging up, they couldn't see anything else but that flag because it represents such an insult. It's so much indignity attached to it. So the flag had to come down. But the Confederate agenda has not come down because the agenda represents not only separation of race but separation of resources. So now you go to the symbolism, to the substance of bank lending, which is down. This 30% African American. Of the state contract, less than 1%. That's the substance of the matter. The state, 30% African American, 3 car dealerships in the whole state.
But that's exactly my point, is we take the flag down and everybody, goes home and calls it a day.
Well, we can't do that. That's why Rainbow Push today had a press conference in Columbia. We're going to have a statewide meeting in Columbia on the 28th of August, the celebration of the 28th of August, March in 1963. Focusing on, the Voting Rights Act being protected again, because right now it's made vulnerable with the absence of Section 4 being enforced. The Medical Act being expanded and included.
Yes.
Fair share of contracts. a commitment to end poverty and so much violence. Because in a moral sense, we have learned to survive apart. We must now unlearn that lesson and learn to live together as brothers and sisters in a civilized way. It was a beautiful moment in South Carolina when that flag came down to see blacks and whites rallying together. But you can't just rally around removing the flag and not remove the agenda of separation of resources.
Yeah, this is what really bothers me. I feel like there's so much media attention on the symbolic act, and then there's no follow-up. You know, taking a flag down, electing a black president, that's just the beginning of a process. And I worry that we kind of all go home and feel good, as though that indicates progress. And I worry a little bit about that. And speaking of symbolism, I mean, today marks the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, which should have paved the way for more voter participation. But we now see new roadblocks being laid.
Well, what happened was in 1965, we got the Protected Voting Rights Act with the federal intervention. Not only did blacks get the right to vote, white women couldn't serve on juries. 18-year-olds who served in Vietnam could not vote. You couldn't vote on college campuses. You could not vote bilingually. So it took us 25 years to fulfill the promise of the Voting Rights Act, and because of that, you had more black-white participation in sharing influence districts. But in 2013, the Supreme Court removed the enforcement factor from it.
Yes.
Which allowed the right wing to marginalize white Democrats out of the Congress and stack and pack black and brown districts. So now you have basically a white Republican Party, a basically black and a few white Democratic Party. And that's not a good thing. That Section 4 enforcement of the Voting Rights Act must be revisited.
Right. Well, we could take a simple thing like, I don't know, of shortening the time frame to register to vote. We can take things like same day registration, those kinds of things, and they all seem to be reducing the number of people of color that can vote. So we're going to talk about that. We have got to take a short break here, but when we come back, let's talk about that voting problem that we're facing right now, 50 years after the Voting Rights Act was passed. You're listening to the Costa Report. Now, if you've been listening to the Costa Report, you know that I'm on the air each and every week for one reason. It's become very difficult to separate fact from unproven beliefs. And the media, who we used to be able to rely on to tell us the difference, has become one of the worst offenders of all when it comes to making a distinction. But in addition to being on the air, I've written a book which explains why losing a grip on the facts is so dangerous. It eventually culminates in irrational public policy, something many of us worry about today. So I'm urging you to go to RebeccaCosta.com and get your copy of The Watchman's Rattle, an eye-opening book which after the first few chapters you'll be telling all your friends about. That's The Watchman's Rattle at RebeccaCosta.com. Do it now, RebeccaCosta.com, and remember, The Watchman's Rattle.
People do not like going to the dentist unless they're going to this dentist. Hello, folks. Michael Olson here with Dr. Guy Peabody. Dr. Guy, whenever I go by your office, I see people with big smiles on their face. What's the secret?
I'm glad you're seeing everybody smiling. You know, we like to make people smile on the inside as well as on the outside.
What do you mean by smiling on the inside, doctor?
Well, we just treat people the way we want to be treated. We befriend our patients. They're not really our patients. They're more our family. We have a good time. We want to provide, obviously, an excellent quality service and stability in our care. But, you know, I'll be working throughout the day and I'll hear laughter down the hallway between my hygienist and her patients, and the front desk, I'll hear people chuckling, and people are a little reluctant to kind of head out the door. They're having a really good time.
Call Dr. Guy Peabody for a consultation today and wake up to a great smile tomorrow. 831-457-0343 or visit drpeabody.com.
Hi, it's MZ. I want to share some really personal information with you. It's a fact that as we age, it becomes more challenging to do certain things that used to be much easier for us to do when we were younger. I'm 63 now, and I can't hop across the beach rocks that I used to do with ease 20 years ago. It's clear to me that at some point in the future, I will probably need help doing things I do with ease by myself today. My wonderful mom, Kay, is at that point now. At 30-plus years older than me, Kay is still able to give great motherly advice, just as always, and voice excellent radio spots. But she now needs some assistance doing things around the house and keeping her mind and body engaged. Thank God for Jackie Tucker and her wonderful staff at Care from the Heart in-home services here in Santa Cruz, in business for the past 18 years. Entrusting a loved one to the care of someone outside the family can certainly be a stressful experience. Not with Care from the Heart. Every associate is competent, professional, and sensitive as can be. What sets them apart is the prompt response when care is needed. If you or a loved one needs help, a little or a lot, at home or in an assisted living facility, I strongly recommend Care from the Heart in-home services. Call 476-8316 or online at carefromtheheart.net. Call 476-8316 or carefromtheheart.net. Please tell them MZ sent you. Care from the Heart in-home service will serve your loved one with dignity and respect.
This Sunday at 8 a.m. on AM 1080 KSCO, join Ken Michaels for America's top financial advice show, Mortgage Makeovers. Ken is the #1 expert in mortgage lending, real estate, debt settlement, loan modifications, and credit repair. Mortgage Makeovers is brought to you by Onyx Lending, creating a totally stress-free loan experience. Contact Onyx at 844-GO-TO-ONYX or at onyxlending.com. Don't miss Mortgage Makeovers this Sunday morning at 8 a.m. right here on AM 1080 KSCO.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is Jesse Jackson. And before the break, we were talking about the Voting Rights Act and the need to fulfill the promise of this landmark piece of legislation. Currently, 25% of the black voting population report that they are affected by the need for specific identification, compared to only 8% of white voters. And we also know that states that will allow Election Day registration have a 10% greater turnout than states that don't, and there are fewer and fewer states that are allowing that. It feels as though, by every measure, that the deck's being stacked.
The forces that once denied the right to vote never stopped trying to diminish it. Once we got the right to vote, we found out white women couldn't serve on juries. 18-year-olds couldn't vote. You couldn't vote bilingually. You couldn't vote on campuses. Then the use of gerrymandering, annexation, at-large, roll purging. These schemes have never stopped. Finally, they got to the Supreme Court to determine we were voting enough now and then needed more protections. Why can't we just have automatic age 18 voter registration as citizens? At age 18, your identity is known. You know who you are. You're an American citizen. To remove all the politics out of registration, for example. Have enough time for on-site same-day registration. We have that technology. Gene, if you were to write today, go downstairs and get a ticket. While they were writing that ticket, if you had not paid one in Miami or Seattle, you would get the registration right now. So there's enough known about each of us to remove all of the hocus pocus out of registration and easy access.
Now, you've gone even farther. You've called for the Constitution to be amended to include the right to vote. Today, the Constitution only prohibits discriminating on the basis of race, sex, and age, but everything else is pretty much left to the states. Isn't that right?
And that's the ultimate crippling factor, is that we need the constitutional right to vote, but we do not have. We only have the states' right to vote. In 1870, when the voting rights, we were first able to vote after 246 years. As long as we were protected by the troops, voting took place. It was a whole new day in the South. When they removed the troops and removed protections, in the next, between 1873, 1883, and 1950, there were 4,200 lynchings of blacks. 4,200 lynchings. Politics of terror drove blacks away from the polls. until we finally made some kind of comeback in 1965, 195 years later, should I say. Whenever the Voting Rights Act is protected by the federal government, it works. When it's unprotected, the states run amiss.
Mm-hmm. Let's switch gears here for a moment and talk about the upcoming presidential election. Now, you go way back with Bernie Sanders, who endorsed you during your 1988 candidacy. And Sanders also marched with Martin Luther King and has a long civil rights history. Yet Black Lives Matter pushed Sanders on the issue of police brutality and racial equality. And I got to admit, he fumbled a bit. Any chance you can step in and help him out?
Well, I have not made a decision to get directly involved in that campaign at this point. Suffice it, Brenda's a good man. He endorsed me, I might add.
He did.
And I'm excited about the fact that O'Malley's in there. To have a vigorous Democratic campaign would be better than having just a sole campaign on the trail. Ms. Costa, I'm going to have to leave now.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't realize that we were going to lose you so soon, but I do appreciate your time. Before you leave, let me ask you one more question. What does a presidential candidate need to do to connect with the black community?
Address real needs. People need jobs, education, health care, and one to the rules. When we are protected by law, we do amazingly well. Once we got the right to vote protected by law, we voted. When we get jobs, we work. We have schools. We go to school. The affordable health care should apply to all. I think some of these instances, it's not just black and white, it's wrong and right. Let's have affordable care for every American, and let's have a trade policy that does not drain jobs, that balances the economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, what is it that's keeping us from doing those things? I mean, what's in the way here?
Sometimes it's narrow focused politics. When you can purchase campaigns with this $1 billion campaigns. It's an inherently corrupt process, and ultimately those who get the most money get the most attention. It's inherently undemocratic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be very interesting because all of the campaign messages seem to leave people of color out. I don't hear it being addressed. I only hear it being addressed in terms of immigration law, and that's a concern.
There are more poor whites than there are poor blacks, whites, blacks, and browns alike. Let's address the issue of poverty and pain and violence. That's the morally correct thing to do. Let's go bottom up, not just top down. All right?
Yes.
Thanks to you.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time to be on the program today. So I am now joined by Bill Graff and also Charles Friedman, who are veteran news reporters, and we've been listening to the Reverend Jesse Jackson. So what did you think, Charles? Is there anything that jumped out?
Well, a number of things. Gee whiz, I took a few notes here. I can't trust myself to recall. It's interesting. Right at the outset, you asked about why African Americans weren't doing all that well in a modern economy, and we were told, well, it's because laws that you alluded to that guarantee equality, treatment, etc., these laws aren't being enforced. And I think to myself, I have my arguments as a conservative with Barack Obama and Eric Holder, the recent Attorney General, but I can't bring myself to believe that these men would be uninterested in assuring that civil rights laws were vigorously enforced. I think what Mr. Jackson ought to be doing is looking a little bit more deeply at the fact that so many blacks in America today are not competitive for the jobs he was talking about because their schools are leagues worse than you find in other parts of the country, because their communities are broken, because their families are broken. And I would submit that this is a result of policies, many of which he talked about, war on poverty policies, etc. There are plenty of people nowadays, even on the left in America, who look at these things and say, these were well-meaning programs, but we now look at the results and we see that we have wrought something terrible. We need to turn the page. We need to look at these things all over again. Jesse Jackson seemed to me to be a voice speaking from way, way in the past.
Well, I think this is all about the cart and the horse. You know, I mean, which is the cart and which is the horse? I think what you're saying is, and by the way, I know a lot of the CEOs of the largest companies in Silicon Valley. And Jesse Jackson once a year comes out and reminds them that their employee base is not diverse. He's absolutely right. It's not. I think something along the neighborhood of 70% or 80% of the population of Google is white.
Exactly.
Okay, so, but let me contrast that against the fact that if you go to the HR managers, right, the HR directors of each of these Silicon Valley companies, they will tell you they have tons of jobs they can't fill, that they haven't been able to fill for years.
Right.
Because the people that apply for them are not qualified.
Right.
And they are not going to shoulder the burden of educating and training them. They don't feel that that's their responsibility. They'd rather go to India and get a PhD.
This is what I'm talking about.
Bill?
Well, I just wanted to point out that Jesse made a point when he said that, the people would rather hire workers from India who are already trained than to train them themselves. And you made the point I was just about to make that it's not Google's
it's not
place
the
to
employer's
train.
responsibility.
Exactly. They should if they should be able to hire workers that are already trained.
And look,
and whose fault is that?
And I'm going to be real honest. Businesses care about diversity, but not if it affects their bottom line.
I'd like to.
That's where they draw the line.
When we come back from the break, I'd like you to explain what has happened today, why we only had the Reverend for a half an hour.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit unusual, and I'll be happy to talk about it.
It's kind of an interesting situation.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about it in the next hour. We're going to have to shortly take our second break. We're breaking from format today because the Reverend couldn't stay for the full hour, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I am fortunate to have by my side here in the studio Charles Friedman and Bill Graff, and so I think it's going to be a good show. Stay right where you are. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Costa Report.